Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Super Tease video. And in this one, I'm going to be breaking down which specializations are the most fun in 10.2.5. And fun is obviously subjective. However, I do think generally it can be broken down into two camps. You either want something that's just really easy and you're just immediately having success smashing people, and that's fun, or you want something that's really complicated and challenging that you can advance your skills through and you enjoy the progression of mastery. I think those are the two main things generally that players are looking for. So we're going to be talking about both of those, whether or not the specialization has one of two of those or both of those, because if it has both, it's definitely going to be going up into the most fun. And if it doesn't have either of those, then it's probably going to more feel like suffering. You also do need to take into account a little bit of game balance, not just fantasy and, how the class feels, because if something is just really undertuned, even though you might feel like you're learning and advancing, most of the time you're going to feel like suffering. So there's a lot to take into account with this, but we're going to be breaking it all down for you so you know exactly what is the right fit for you by the end of the video. All right, the first specialization we've got here is the Affliction Warlock. Now, this is a specialization that will reward you through pursuit of mastery. As you get better at this class, as you get better at kiting and doing maximum damage, you will feel that type of growth. However, it is not tuned in a way that it will really feel very powerful, and it will not feel like you're just walking in and just smashing people. So it's only one out of the two of those. I would also say that it's probably on the weaker side. Although in solo shuffle you can have more success, there are a lot of frustrating lobbies and situations in terms of game balance right now with things like outlaw rogues and demon hunters running you down that will make it, down another tier. So it doesn't have two of the things, right? It's not dirt easy, and it doesn't have that pursuit of mastery, so it's not going to come up here in the most fun. Because of game balance, I think it falls down from fun, and it just ends up kind of in the okay category for right now in Affliction. Now, Arcane Mage is a specialization that, again, pursuit to mastery. As you spend more time with the specialization, you will feel more rewarded. You will feel like you have a lot of growth potential with this specialization. It is great for that. However, much like Affliction, it is not going to be, immediately out of the box giving you results and giving you dopamine and making you feel good. It's going to take a little bit of time. So it doesn't have 2 out of 2 of those main things that we've been talking about. And in terms of game balance, though, it is strong. So if it was a little bit easier for beginners in terms of its overall strength, as well as how much you can grow and master the specialization, it would be the most fun. But for right now, we're just putting it down on fun. Arms Warrior, this is a specialization, I think, that as you advance, you will be able to feel stronger, and you'll be able to get intervene timings. You'll monitor your mobility better, keeping your dot uptime, managing and syncing up your cooldowns, peeling for your teammates. It has a broad, spectrum of things that you can do in the game and advance as a player, which is great. Maybe it's not the absolute top end of all of the melee DPS, but it's definitely, towards the higher up part of that. It also does have a decent beginner-friendly feel, mostly because of things like Avatar Bladestorm and Bladestorm. When you activate these talents, you will just do a massive amount of damage while being unpeelable, and you can kind of just pain train your way through and do massive crit damage immediately while being immune to CC, which makes it a lot more new player friendly than something like Arcane or Affliction Lock. However, in terms of game balance, it's on the medium level. I wouldn't say that it's like super weak, but it's not super strong in terms of game balance. So I think for game balance, it's taking it down from most fun to fun. Otherwise, if it was a little bit stronger in the meta, I would say that it is the most fun. And those 3 main contributing factors, if it doesn't have the 3, it's going to be jumping down a tier every time for that. Assassination Rogue, this is a specialization where you do feel like you have growth of mastery, monitoring, trying to keep your bleeds up on multiple targets. It is a lot of resource management. Actually, Assassination in the past has been more on the simpler side. It probably still is considered the simplest rogue spec, but it's more complicated than it has been in the past, which is a weird place to be. So it does have room to grow. It is not stupendously new player friendly. The amount of setup that you need to do to get to a massive Kingsbane crit requires a lot of complicated math that you're going to have to do in order to figure out how to get that maximum damage output from my own personal experience. And it's not strong in the meta. So it's already got it's missing those 3 components, but it does have a decent amount of growth. So I don't think it's complete suffering. I think it's probably just meh at the moment, because if you do, I've seen rogues at the higher levels of the ladder, 25 to 2600, but it's definitely weaker in terms of balance, a little bit more complicated to pick up initially, but it does have decent growth in terms of its skill development and what you can do with the specialization for fun. Balanced Druid, now this is a specialization that has a lot of room for growth, whether it be with cycloning, off healing, the crowd control that it has, your damage output, lining up your burst, has a huge amount of room to grow. I would say out of all the casters, it's decently beginner friendly, mostly because your damage rotation is, mostly instant cast. However, according to the analytics that I've looked up, which we have to include a little bit of analytics, boomkins tend to be one of the first specs to die in solo shuffle, which means it tells me that it's not very beginner friendly if it's the highest death rate, because that means lower rated players are probably dying more on average with it. But it could also just mean that it's such a threat that it's a priority target, so it's dying first more times because it's a priority target. So you got to take those two things into account. I think it is more beginner friendly than a lot of other casters just because of instant damage. I think it's got a lot of room to grow. And I definitely think that it's actually powerful in the current meta. So for me, I would actually say that Balanced Druid is the most fun. I know somebody's going to come in the comment section and say, you're biased because you main Moonkin. But again, I'm breaking it down on my 3 credentials. It's got room for growth and development and mastery as a player. It's decently beginner friendly due to being mostly instant cast damage. When you're interrupted, you can rely on bear form. And within the game balance, it's definitely towards the top end. So it's hitting all 3 of those pretty well. I think that it's fair to put it up here into the most fun. Beast Mastery Hunter, this is a specialization that doesn't feel like it has a lot of room for growth, but it has immediate results as far as a beginner player. You will just do so much remarkable damage with your pets. You will feel how powerful you are offensively, but in terms of game balance, it starts to, it wavers because offensively it's really strong, but defensively it's very weak. And as you get towards the higher level, its offense starts to teeter off because players know how to counter it. But its initial beginner friendliness is really what you want to pay attention to. But I think because of its defensive lacking, and then its weakness as you climb towards the top end, and its lack of growth towards mastery, it's probably pulling it down 2 tiers. And I would say that it's probably okay fun. Again, this is if you wanted to look for just dirty fun at low rating, this one's going to be really good for you. But if you want something that's overall fun, encompasses all 3 of those aspects that I'm talking about, I don't think it's going to be able to hit the mark. Blood Death Knight, you're causing suffering onto others. It is really strong right now, but I don't think that it has much room for growth. It's just gripping targets together and being unkillable. It's kind of vile. Brewmaster, you're causing suffering onto others. Demonology Warlock, this one has a huge room for growth of mastery in terms of monitoring your demons, timing them around your tyrant, trying to maximize your damage. You have every crowd control diminishing return. You've got the mobility of gateway and portal. You have to deal with interrupts. Frequently it has a very high level of mastery and growth that you'll feel with this specialization. It's probably more initially friendly than Affliction, mostly because you have crowd control to CC melee attackers off of you. You can stun them and then coil them and get them off of you so you can cast your important spells, which are a lot more threatening than the abilities that Affliction has. So I'd say in terms of game balance, it's slightly ahead of Affliction. In terms of pursuit of mastery, it's about the same as Affliction, maybe a little bit less than Affliction, but about the same. And then initial fun, if you're right out of the box, it might be frustrating. I think most casters that have to cast a lot of spells like Demonology probably held back. So in that third regard, it's probably going down a little bit. We'll put it here. We'll reorganize this from left to right at the end, but I would say that's probably down 1 tier in terms of fun, just because its initial experience when you play it, you're going to be getting interrupted a lot, and you might be getting frustrated and dealing with when getting attacked compared to some other specializations. Destruction Warlock. I would say this one doesn't have as much of a pursuit of growth towards the absolute top end as opposed to Affliction or even Demonology. I feel like you could always min-max those things. It's a little bit simpler to play, but it also makes it way more beginner friendly. A lot of its damage is instant cast burst. You can cast Immolate. Most people won't kick you on that. You can Conflag and Shadow Burn and not really have to deal with all the frustrations that a lot of other casters have to do. It's really powerful in the current meta. It does have a decent amount of pursuit to mastery because you need to use things like your mobility, your crowd control, honor talents like Soul Rip and timing those things during enemy burst windows. You will feel like you have room to grow. So for me, I think this is probably going to be going up under the most fun because it's hitting all 3 of those. It's decently beginner friendly with some of the things that it has in its kit. It's really powerful in the current meta, and it does have room for growth and mastery. Devastation Evoker. This is one that is immediately good out of the box. It is going to be super fun and powerful because it's one button. You press Disintegrate. Its Deep Breath and its cooldowns are really powerful in the current meta. I'd say defensively, maybe it's a little bit lacking, but it's one of the best classes to deal with melee DPS at lower rating. You see a lot of those. So hovering around with immunity to snare while spamming Disintegrate at your enemies will feel really good. But as far as pursuit of growth and mastery, I think it's held back a little bit in this regard. You've got some things like you can Verdant Embrace and you can off off heal and support your allies. Its crowd control isn't the most impactful with things like Sleepwalk. Landslide is a really long cooldown, so you don't really have to, frequently be thinking about it. Personal defensives are pretty straightforward. A lot of stuff is kind of babied to you a bit, so it prevents your growth with the immunity to slows while you're flying around. So Pursuit of Mastery is probably like a little bit lower. It is decently strong in the meta though, and it's really beginner friendly. So for me, I'm going to be putting it onto the fun tier. I think because it's Pursuit to Mastery, making yourself feel like you're different than other Devastation evokers could also be a way of thinking Pursuit of Mastery. You're going to have a hard time doing that than with these other specializations. So I think coming down to the fun tier is probably a better place for it, carried by balance and like how new player friendly it is. Disc Priest is definitely not new player friendly. It's, I would say it's moderately strong in the meta, like medium level. Main problem is mana, so maybe it's on the weaker side. But Pursuit of Mastery is unparalleled. I love when I'm playing Disc Priest and I'm trying to min-max how I'm going to be spreading my Purge the Wickets with Penance, min-maxing my damage, how I'm rotating through my cooldowns, how I'm trying to think of cooldown reduction, how I'm trying to navigate in and get crowd control. I really have fun in terms of Pursuit of Mastery and difficulty, but it's not very beginner friendly and it's not super strong in the meta, so that's going to be pulling it down, 2 tiers down onto the OK tier. I wouldn't say that it's abysmal though in balance. It's not going to be coming down here. Elemental Shaman, this one's probably the, I just said Devastation was, but I think Ellie might be one of the most beginner friendly casters, just because it's Flame Shock and Lava Burst. You're just running around using mostly instant cast, decently mobile with Ghost Wolf, a lot of instant cast crowd control like Lasso and Earth Grab roots to be able to escape, knockbacks. It's going to be feeling pretty good as a new player. As far as Pursuit to Mastery, min-maxing the damage is something, but it's really not that complicated. I'd say its Pursuit of Mastery is probably more in line with Wind Shear and Grounding, which does increase its level of difficulty, whereas you could always be using a Grounding Tone better to stop a spell, or Wind Shearing an important cast to win the game or to stop your team from losing. So it does have a lot of Pursuit to Mastery in those elements. It's just not based on its damage rotation. In terms of meta, I would not say that it's like the absolute most powerful, although it's winning some tournament matches. It's got to be towards the top end. So I think it's probably fair to say that it's up here. I think mostly the Pursuit of Mastery comes from its defensive play and not its offensive play. Because its offensive play is pretty easy to do. But because its offensive play is easy to do, it's a more beginner friendly, so it helps it hit all 3 heads of being the most fun. So we'll put it up here for now. I think that's fair. Enhancement Shaman, really decent high level of Pursuit of Mastery because you're limited on mobility. You've really got to pick your moments on where you're going to go. You've got the Grounding and Wind Shear similar to Elemental, so that level of disruption and always min-maxing those opportunities, off healing with Earth Shield and Healing Stream. You're going to have a lot of choices in that regard. So it's got a decent amount of Pursuit to Mastery. It's not very strong in the meta. I would say that is its main problem, is it's just not powerful. Again, limited mobility is one of those things. And then in terms of how easy initially, you can get a decent amount of damage off pretty easily with just Lava Lash build and just smashing your buttons on the keyboard, but you're gonna have a harder time connecting your target. So in terms of game balance, I think that takes it down a tier. It's got a respectable amount of mastery in terms of difficulty, and it's decently fun to pick out of the box. So this is honestly a hard one that I'm somewhat cycling like between here and here. We'll put it maybe at the top of okay, because I do think like maybe it's a little stronger in the meta. It would definitely be up here. Feral Druid, this is another one where it's got a very high Pursuit of Mastery. Picking your moments when to go in and out is the main thing with Feral Druid. If you're picking the wrong moment to go in, you're probably gonna lose the game. If you're picking the right moments all the time, you're probably gonna win more often than not. You got Cyclone to monitor, a lot of damage rotation, cool abilities to think about, like maintaining bleeds and uptime, when to use switch to bite, when to go for clone, when to run away. You got a lot of choices. Pursuit of Mastery. Initially out of the box, it's going to be pretty difficult to have success. It is really squishy, and it's not going to just immediately one-shot things with one button, similar to Devastation Evoker. So that's going against it. And in terms of like the meta, it's not the worst, but it's not the best. It's mostly due to defense. So for me, I think it's probably either like okay or just a little bit lower on the fun side. Again, Pursuit to Mastery is probably carrying this thing more than Enhancement. So maybe we'll lob it up here for now, just because I think Enhanced doesn't have as much room to do things and outplay people as Feral Druid, although Feral Druid is probably, maybe it's close to about the same. I think it's fair to say Feral up here. Fire Mage, Pursuit to Mastery, honestly, I mean, Mage in general has a high Pursuit to Mastery with Polymorph and stuff, but with the playstyle of it at the moment, it's actually pretty low. Most of your damage is instant cast and guaranteed, which makes it much easier to play, and I would actually say that this is probably the most beginner-friendly spec for Mage. In terms of the meta, it's not the most powerful. It's, probably medium. I'd say around medium level, mostly, again, due to how squishy it is. And Pursuit of Mastery is, again, going to be based around Polymorph, Counterspell, Frost Nova, and your mobility, how you're using your blinks and how you're using your displacement. You are going to have a decent amount of success offensively out of the box with this spec because the damage is very front loaded, easy to get off, pop combustion, shove all your globals through. But if you're not good with your kit in terms of mobility, you're going to die a lot. So this is honestly a hard one to mix in here. So, you know, medium level in terms of viability, not the best growth in terms of mastery, but really good beginner friendly. So maybe it's like the best of the okay in terms of fun. Frost Mage, probably the medium level of mage, you know, fire easy, frost medium, arcane hard in terms of pursuit of mastery, so a little bit above fire in terms of difficulty pursuit. In terms of viability, I'd say it's also a little bit ahead of fire. And in terms of beginner friendly, it's kind of a rough one because if you don't know how to use Frost Bomb and you don't know how to use Ray of Frost or Glacial Spike, you don't really have a good win condition. But as soon as you know how to use those abilities, you're going to win a lot. So, you know, right out of the box, just make sure you know how to use those 3 abilities. You're going to be doing decently well. So for me, I think it's probably somewhere here. I think the Pursuit of Mastery is a little bit lower than Arcane, but it's a little bit easier than Arcane to initially have success on, which pulls it up to about the same closeness in terms of fun. Frost Death Knight, there's not a lot of Pursuit of Mastery for this. You're either playing it in one way or you're not even going to be able to play the spec. So there's not a lot of growth for it. I would say that it's like almost on the bottom in terms of potential growth of mastery. In terms of viability, it's like medium, low medium. But in terms of new player friendly, if you know how to grip the targets together and one-shot them, you're going to have some initial success out of the box. But I think the viability and the Pursuit of Mastery is pulling it down a lot for me right now in terms of how fun it is. So I'm putting it down here onto meh. Fury Warrior, there's like basically no Pursuit of Mastery. This spec is very simple to pick up, but it doesn't have like initial power. You're not very powerful and strong in terms of being able to close out the game. And in terms of competitive viability, it's very low. So for me, Fury Warrior might be the first DPS spec we're actually lobbing down here onto Suffering. It's just, it doesn't hit any of the 3. It's got no Pursuit of Mastery, but it's also not just simple, powerful fun, and it's not very competitive. So it doesn't hit any of those. So I think it's fair to say it's probably towards the very low end in terms of fun. Guardian Druid, you're causing suffering onto others. Havoc Demon Hunter. This one is a bit of an illusion because a lot of people think Demon Hunter is really simple, and it is. The damage rotation is, but the avoidance of things, like using Vengeful Retreat to take less damage or avoid crowd control. I'd say your CC is easier to execute because it's mostly instant, imprison, and ranged stuns. So it's on the easier end, but it's mostly crowd control avoidance, I think, where the skill cap comes into this specialization. Damage, though, is really easy to do. So it's really easy out of the box to start having success with Demon Hunter. It's got a decent level of pursuit and growth of mastery in terms of trying to separate yourself from other Demon Hunters, but not a lot. And it's really powerful in the meta. So I think probably somewhere up here at the moment. It's hitting pretty close to all 3 of those heads. So we'll be putting it up here for now. Holy Priest, Pursuit of Mastery, pretty low. It's pretty simple with things like Serenity as your immediate instant heal, spamming flash. It's got some good beginner friendly abilities though, like jumping into angel form and being immune to CC, and free casting immune from interrupts is a really good mechanic for somebody who's completely new to the game at healer and, you know, has a hard time because you just press that, you're immune to everything. You don't got to worry, you're not stressed at all. It gives you a couple seconds to heal people, which is nice to have as a beginner. In terms of overall power, it's probably like medium. So I'd say its Pursuit of Mastery is not as high as Disc in terms of skill cap, so it's a little bit down from that, but it's more beginner friendly than Disc, and it's maybe like about the same, or about the same in terms of competitive. So it's probably coming out at about the same. This one's going to be more beginner friendly. This is more Pursuit of Mastery oriented, and they're both kind of on the moderate level in terms of viability. So I think that's fair to put it down here. Holy Paladin. Holy Paladin, again, I don't think it has a huge Pursuit of Mastery. It's mostly juggling your Holy Shocks and your Day Breaks to be able to get mana back to yourself and channeling those cooldowns and lining them up. It's just not really complicated. Getting your freedoms out onto your allies is a really important component of this. In terms of competitive viability, it's decently competitively viable because of rogues being so prevalent, and it's just really good into rogues with things like busting and protection and sacrifice and immuning crowd control whenever you run across those things. As far as new player friendly, I actually just played it for the first time this season last night, so I think I'm going to have a pretty good opinion of this. It can be a little bit frustrating if you don't understand how to use Daybreak, but as soon as you understand how Daybreak works and how it duplicates your Holy Shocks, it starts becoming a lot easier to heal. Also, if you don't have the right stats, with no crafted gear, it can be a bit rough, but as you get more gear, it's going to be more beginner friendly. I think it's definitely more beginner friendly than some other healers though, because it's mostly instant cast healing, or when you do cast, you're using things like Divine Favor and speeding up the cast of your Flashlight a lot. And you have a lot of hard reset abilities like Bubble to just immune all damage, Avenging Wrath guarantees guarantees that you're going to have powerful healing for like a significant amount of time in a game. So it's definitely really beginner friendly, decently competitive in the current meta. Not a lot of room for growth though. So not a lot of room for growth, but it's going to feel more competitively viable, and it's a little bit more beginner friendly. So it depends on what you want, but I'm putting it up a little bit higher just because of that, because it's hitting 2 of the heads instead of the 1. Honestly, I think Paladin, I would put Paladin maybe lower just from personal preference, but in terms of the criteria that I've outlined for this video, I think it makes sense for it to go here. Marksmanship Hunter, not a lot of room for growth with this one. It's very straightforward in terms of just aim shot into 2 arcane shots, try and use rapid fire on cooldown, very simple rotation. Not a lot of room for growth in terms of mastery. Maybe a little bit more than beast mastery, because you have to be more tactical with where you're positioning, because you have to be stationary a lot of the time. So a little bit higher than beast mastery in terms of pursuit of mastery, but overall between all the specs, it's honestly not that high. In terms of, you know, beginner friendly, it's honestly maybe pretty decently beginner friendly offensively. You get a lot of burst damage, which can catch people off guard, especially at lower ratings when you're beginning. But defensively, it's just completely weak. You're gonna have such a hard time with demon hunters and death knights running at you doing low damage to plate classes. So I think viability pulls it down. It's medium level beginner friendly, doesn't have a lot of pursuit of growth, so it's probably like somewhere in here, probably a little bit better than beast mastery in terms of those 3 criteria points. Mistweaver Monk, pursuit of mastery, pretty low. I'd say mostly with your portal and avoiding CC is going to be the main kind of skill cap where you can, you know, separate yourself from other Mistweaver monks. But as far as rotations go, it's not super complicated, whether you're even fist weaving or you're doing casted Mistweaver. So, you know, lower moderate level in terms of pursuit of mastery and growth for this specialization. As far as, you know, immediate success, it's got really high throughput, and especially if you play fist weaver, it can be really easy to just get a lot of healing out with it. In terms of competitive viability, it's probably very similar to Paladin. So honestly, it's probably coming into a similar position as Paladin with those 3 points in regard taken into account. Outlaw Rogue, massive pursuit of mastery. You know, there's an infinite number of possibilities and routes that you can do in a game on the specialization. It is really powerful in the game once you've hit that point of mastery, but it is not beginner friendly. It is absolutely not beginner friendly. So if you're looking for something that's complicated and a worthwhile investment, it's definitely worth playing. If you're looking for something to just start having success right away, it's not going to be able to give that. So I'm going to take it down here because of that one, you know, it's only 2 out of 3, so it can't get us up to the most fun. Preservation Evoker, this has a huge pursuit of mastery. You have to aim most of your significant heals, keeping track of their positioning. You got to play close to the fight because you're limited range, which is a lot more intense. So you're always going to be able to find ways to be able to outperform other healers. You have to juggle in damage with healing. You can't just only heal, which again is another level of pursuit of mastery. In terms of ease out of the box, you do get some cooldowns like Emerald Communion, which are just guaranteed heals that are really powerful, that are likely going to keep your team alive throughout the opener. So it's decently beginner friendly. But in terms of competitive viability, it's a little bit lower, and that's mostly due to its limited range. So I think because of that, its competitive viability, it's going down onto the fun tier. Prot Warrior, you want to cause suffering onto others. Prot Paladin, you want to cause suffering onto others. Resto Shaman, pursuit of mastery, really high. Monitoring, keeping where your totems are going. Trying to get your casted heals to get stacks up for your Riptide healing. Wind Shear and grounding, much like Ellie and enhancement. But you have to cast a lot more than those specs, which makes it harder. And the pursuit of mastery is going to be higher as a result of that. Static field totem, repositioning enemies, trying to root and min-max. There's a lot of growth for this one. In terms of initial, it can be a little frustrating, but if you just drop Healing Tide and Ascendance and Guidance, your healing is remarkably high. You just need to activate all of your cooldowns at the beginning of the game as a beginner, and you'll notice your healing being really powerful. So I think it's respectably beginner friendly because of that. And then in terms of the middle, in terms of viability, it's actually really competitive at the moment, winning a lot of tournaments. So honestly, I think this one's probably going up onto the most fun because it's hitting all 3 of those at the moment. Resto Druid, pursuit of mastery. You know, a lot of times, most of your heals are instant. You're in Tree of Life. I'd say Cyclone is probably where the skill cap comes into this class. So you will always be able to find opportunities to like Cyclone out of CC or Cyclone somebody low HP. You'll be able to do something with that. So it does have some pursuit of mastery because of that, but its rotation is a lot easier than other healers because you're going to spend most of your time in tree form instantly healing, which makes it, again, beginner friendly. You get things like bear form when you're getting attacked, tranquility for immunities. So you have everything that makes it a beginner friendly spec with room to grow with Cyclone, and it's really complicated or really competitive in the current meta. So hits all 3. This is an easy up under the most fun. For Retribution Paladin, Pursuit of Mastery, pretty low. It's going to come mostly from things like Sanctuary and Freedom and getting your healer and your allies out of crowd control and that level of awareness. So it's got like a moderate level of Pursuit of Growth in terms of being different than other rep paladins, but its initial out of the box power is really high. It just does monstrous amounts of damage. You have immunity to CC abilities and immunity to damage abilities, which lets you just run in and smash people. So it's probably one of the most beginner friendly specs because of that. And as far as competitive viability, I'd say it's like medium, higher medium level in terms of viability. So I think this one, it's fair to say that it's going to be going up onto the most fun. I think its room to grow is a little bit lower though, which is holding it down from the most fun. Shadow Priest, room to grow mastery, really high, astronomical in terms of monitoring, keeping your dots up, trying to get pressure going. It is absolutely not beginner friendly though. Catharsis and the Shadow Word pain damage from your set bonus does give you a little bit of instant cast damage, but it's a lot harder to understand initially and deliver than pressing Wings and Templar's Verdict. It's a little bit more complicated and nuanced in that regard, so it's not very new player friendly. You're going to get trained a lot and you have to cast a lot, which can be really difficult. It is though, on the higher level of competitive end, and when you reach, much like Outlaw Rogue, towards the level of mastery, you're going to start having success. So it probably makes sense for it to be on a similar tier to Outlaw. It's like the reverse of Devastation though, right? It's fun because it's complicated and competitively viable, as opposed to Devastation being easy and initially strong and competitively viable. Subtlety Rogue, this one, Pursuit of Mastery, you're going to have an infinite level of growth in terms of figuring out which line to victory, but it's not new player friendly. If you've never played it before, you're never going to win a game. So it's absolutely zeroed out on that column. Competitive viability, though, once you've hit Pursuit of Mastery, is pretty high. I'd say that it's respectively high. So similar to Outlaw Rogue, we're going to be putting it here in terms of the overall ranking. Survival Hunter, Pursuit of Mastery is much higher for this than the other specs. I think it's due to its melee limited range and like picking your moments and coming in and navigating around that and how to avoid situations. I think makes it more complicated to play. Its rotation is more intricate as well with more abilities. So it's got a higher level Pursuit of Mastery than those other specs. New player friendly. You can do a decent amount of burst damage initially. That's usually what the things that define beginner friendly is like, can you do high burst damage and one-shot people? And do you have like invincibility cooldowns that are reasonably easy to use? And are you like passively tanky? Those are kind of like the three things that make something new player friendly. You're not really super passively tanky. You don't really have a huge amount of high burst, but I think your Pursuit to Mastery and your viability makes you a little bit more fun than the other Hunter specs at the moment. For Unholy Death Knight, Pursuit of Mastery, probably medium. It's higher than Frost for sure. Monitoring your wound stacks, picking your moments to burst them, trying to synergize your cooldowns together, setting up death grips and crowd control onto healers. You have a little bit more things to think about in terms of your overall sustained damage. Your decently level of competitive viability, beginner friendly, pretty decent. Again, with things like Apocalypse, you can do a lot of immediate cast, instant cast bursts. You've got immunities like AMS. You're decently passively tanky, although you're generally the first target. You have some time to react with the cooldowns that you have. So I think for Unholy, it's probably coming in like around here on the fun tier. It's got some Pursuit of Mastery. It's decently beginner friendly, and it's decently competitive. So it's like medium in all three. It has all three, and it's at a medium level. So I think that puts it fairly at the fun level. Vengeance, you want to cause suffering onto others. Windwalker Monk, Pursuit of Mastery is pretty high in terms of mobility, picking your moments, reporting. It is decently new player friendly defensively if you're just activating your defensive cooldowns. The biggest mistake I see with Windwalker is people just don't use their cooldowns like Karma and stuff. But if you're activating your cooldowns, you're pretty decently tanky. So you got some room for growth in terms of mastery. Pretty straightforward and easy out of the box defensively, offensively. Press Serenity, big Rising Sun kick damage. I think it's the illusion of it being like overly complicated. I don't think it's as complicated as it has been in the past. In terms of competitive viability, it's decent. So it's hitting all three of those. So we're going to put it up here onto the most fun. Augmentation Evoker. Pursuit of Mastery is pretty low. Just keeping your buff up, not really difficult. As far as being beginner friendly, it's just not really viable. And so it's not going to feel really beginner friendly. So this one's probably going to feel like suffering. You're probably going to feel like suffering. So if you made it to this point in the video, the breakdown for this was 3 categories. Pursuit of Mastery, it needs to have room to grow. Competitive viability, is it tuned in a way that feels strong? And the third one is like beginner friendly, like is it super powerful out of the box and you'll feel strong? If a spec hits all 3 of those, it is the most fun. If a spec hits only 2 out of 3 of those, it's fun. If a spec only hits 1 out of 3 of those, it's okay. And if it doesn't hit any of them, or it's very low on a lot of the other ones, it's kind of meh. And if it absolutely doesn't have any of them, it's complete suffering. And that's the breakdown of the tier list. I would recommend that you watch each spec individually throughout the video to understand where its ranking has gone. But those are the 3 core fundamentals that I've used to rank these specializations in today's video in terms of which are going to feel the most fun. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.